Kwang Hee's morning begins without surprises. At precisely 7, the quiet sound of his alarm awakens him. He rises from his wide bed, made of dark gray silk. His day is already planned down to the minute. After a shower, he leisurely chooses a suit. Today, it's not a formal jacket, but a suit of expensive silk, the color of wet asphalt. He wears loose-fitting trousers and a shirt without a tie. He looks like a successful businessman, perhaps the owner of a gallery or a fashion boutique. Nothing about him betrays the man accustomed to command. Before leaving, he eats breakfast. Rice, vegetables, green tea. He barely tastes anything. His thoughts are already there, in the office, at the negotiating table. Today, he has an important but boring conversation about supplies. The only personal item on his schedule is a visit to the clinic. He undergoes a full checkup every 6 months. This is a rule he established for himself long ago. Health is a resource. His personal driver, a man in a formal suit and dark glasses, is already waiting at the entrance. The car, large, dark, quiet, pulls silently out of the private area. The drive takes 20 minutes. Kwang Hee looks out the window but can't see the city. He's running through his arguments for the upcoming meeting. The clinic is one of the best private facilities in the city. It's popular with those who value discretion, the absence of lines, and the most modern equipment. He hates this place. He hates the smell of antiseptic, the overly bright lights, and the feeling of being nothing more than a biological specimen undergoing testing. He enters the lobby. It's quiet, soft music playing. At the reception desk, he's greeted with a smile. They already know his name. He fills out paperwork in legible, crisp handwriting. Purpose of visit, routine checkup. The entire procedure will take no more than an hour. He hands over his health passport to the receptionist and turns to enter the lab, which is located at the far end of a long white corridor. He takes 2 steps. His gaze glides forward, in the direction of his movement. At the end of the corridor, by a large window bathed in morning sunlight, stands a woman. At first, the brain registers just a silhouette. A woman, dark-skinned, in a light, loose dress. Long, straight, platinum-colored hair falls over her shoulders. He would hardly notice if not for the incredible, unnatural whiteness of her hair. Such a color is rare, almost unique, and his heart, which a second ago was beating evenly and calmly, gives one heavy, booming beat. Boom! Right into the ribcage. No, it can't be. He freezes in place. His fingers, which had just been holding the pen, involuntarily clench into a fist. He forces himself to take another step, as if approaching a mirage. The light from the window falls on her face, and he sees her profile. A straight nose, full lips, the corners of her mouth turned down. She looks off into the distance, out the window, one hand resting on the windowsill, the other resting on her lower back. Callista, his Callista, or rather, not his anymore, his ex. They hadn't seen each other for exactly 6 months and 3 weeks. He hadn't counted, but his body remembered. It remembered that tight lump in his throat, and the emptiness in his stomach that was there then, and that still remains. He stands, his gaze fixed on her, unable to move. All his planning, all his control evaporates. He's just a pillar, dressed in expensive silk, in the middle of a sterile corridor. His gaze, caught on her face, begins to slowly, against his will, move downward. It slides down her neck, over her shoulders, stopping at the spot where her hand rests on the small of her back. The dress is loose, but the fabric clings to her, where her stomach used to be flat and firm. Now there's a smooth, rounded bulge there, a very large bulge. His brain refuses to form a picture. Callista is here. Callista, pregnant. He watches her inhale and exhale deeply, as if preparing for something. Then she turns her head and says something to a nurse in a light blue uniform standing nearby, holding a folder. The nurse smiles a broad, reassuring smile and nods. She places her hand on Callista's shoulder and gestures to a pair of double doors on the left. There's a sign on the doors. Kwang Hee can't make it out from this distance, but he knows. He knows intuitively. Doors like that only lead to one place. Maternity ward. She's not just pregnant. She's here to give birth. Now. Today. The air leaves his lungs sharply. His vision darkens slightly. He takes an involuntary gulp, but his throat is dry. He sees Callista nod to the nurse, her face focused and serious. She takes a hesitant step toward those doors, and her movement is so familiar, so hers. That same turn of the head, that same straight back, even now at this moment. He hadn't thought about her for 6 months. Or rather, he had, but he'd shoved those thoughts into the deepest, darkest recesses of his mind and locked them tightly. He lived on. He worked. He moved forward. And she was here. And she had brought something into this world that changed everything completely. Everything he'd built over these months, the stone wall of indifference, was cracking and crumbling in the silence of this bright corridor. He doesn't know how long he stands there, motionless, maybe a second, maybe a minute. Time loses its meaning. Then, as if sensing someone's gaze, she slowly turns her head in his direction. Their eyes meet. Her eyes, large, dark brown, the kind he could once read like an open book. At first, simply look. They don't see. They glide over his face, his white hair, his silhouette in his dark suit. Then the same thing happens to him as happened seconds earlier. Realization. Her eyes widen sharply. Her eyebrows rise almost imperceptibly. Her mouth, full lips, opens slightly in surprise. Her hand, resting on her stomach, instinctively clutches the fabric of her dress. They look at each other across 15 meters of white, sunlit space. Between them, there's nothing but silence, the hum of the ventilation system, and that heavy, hanging in the air wonder. He sees the emotions flicker across her face. Shock, confusion, something else, more complex. Anxiety? Irritation? He can't read it. He's forgotten how. Or maybe she's just different. He, too, can't move. Kwang Hee, who always knows what to say, how to position himself, how to control the situation, is now paralyzed. His mind is blank. No ready-made phrases, no masks. There is only this numbness and the wild, pounding question in his temples. Is this my child? But he can't ask it. He can't even take a step. He just watches her look at him. Her gaze hardens. From confusion, it turns to cautious, closed. She's the first to look away. She turns to the nurse, says something quickly and quietly. The nurse casts a quick, curious glance at Kwang Hee and nods. The sight of her turning away, as if erasing him from reality, finally brings him out of his stupor. Something clicks inside. Instinct, stronger than reason. Stop, he wants to shout, but his voice won't obey him. He takes a step, then another. His legs, heavy as lead, begin to move. He walks down the hallway toward her. He doesn't run. His gait is still measured, but lacks its usual confidence. He simply walks, never taking his eyes off her. She hears his footsteps. She sees him approaching from the corner of her eye. He sees her back tense. Her shoulders rise slightly, but she doesn't turn. She waits. He stops 2 steps away from her, closer than a stranger would allow, but further than he ever allowed himself. Her large belly hangs between them, a living, breathing barrier. "Callista," he says. His voice sounds hoarse, unfamiliar even to himself. He hasn't used it since he got out of the car. She slowly turns to face him. Now he sees her face up close. It's as beautiful as ever, but fatigue has settled in dark shadows under her eyes. There's not a drop of joy in her gaze at this meeting, only caution and weariness. "Kwang Hee," she answers. Her voice is even, low, emotionless, simply a statement of fact. Yes, it is him. Yes, she sees him. She says nothing more. She looks at him, waiting. Her silence weighs more heavily than any words. He doesn't know where to begin. 1,000 questions are bursting out, but he compresses them all into one, the safest, the most stupid. How are you?" he says. She sighs almost imperceptibly, as if she had expected something like this. "Fine," she says curtly. Her gaze glides over his suit. "Running tests?" He nods, at a loss for words. His tests. What nonsense now. "And you?" He can't help but look at her belly. He can't help but say it. "Is it soon?" She places her hand on her stomach. A protective, instinctive gesture. "Yes. Today, apparently," she says, as simply as if she were talking about going to the store. The same question thunders in his head again. He chokes on it. He has to ask. He has to. "Callista," he begins, and his voice fails him again. He's not the boss here. He's just a confused man in a suit that's too expensive for this moment. "This?" She looks him straight in the eyes, and in her gaze, he reads the answer even before she speaks. He sees pride, defiance, and something akin to sadness. "It's none of your concern, Kwang Hee," she says quietly but very clearly. Her words hit harder than any blow. He takes a half step back, as if physically recoiling from them. "What do you mean?" "Not mine." He can't formulate the thought. "We're divorced. We have nothing in common. You live your life, I live mine. That's all," she says calmly without anger. This is worse. It sounds like a sentence that was passed long ago and accepted. He sees the nurse next to him, slightly nervous, unsure whether to intervene or not. Callista notices this and turns to her. "Sorry, I'll be right there," she says to the woman with the folder, and her tone takes on that familiar note of polite firmness. The nurse smiles knowingly and moves away to a respectful distance, pretending to study the papers. Callista looks at him again. She looks exhausted, not just physically. It seems this encounter has drained the last of her strength. "Listen, Kwang-hee, it's all decided. I have a plan. Everything is paid for. I will have help. I don't need anything from you," she says quickly, as if she's rehearsed the speech. "You don't have to be here. Go get your tests done. Forget you ever saw me." "Forget?" he repeats, and for the first time, something other than shock breaks through in his voice. A dull, growing panic. "Callista, you're here giving birth to our child, and I'm supposed to forget?" She looks up at him sharply. A fire flares in them, the same fire he remembers, the fire that once delighted him, but in the last months of their marriage only scorched him. "Ours," she says the word with cold emphasis. "You lost the right to use that word 6 months ago, Kwang-hee. When you chose between me and your world, you made your choice. I made mine. This child is my choice, my life. You are no longer part of it. Understood?" She doesn't say it loudly, but every word falls like a stone. He can see how much pain she's in, not just emotionally. She suddenly tenses, her face contorting into a grimace. She grips the windowsill, closes her eyes, takes a deep, slow breath through her nose. A contraction. This sight, her pain, her helplessness in that moment, breaks him completely. All his principles, all his pride. He doesn't see his ex-wife rejecting him. He sees a woman about to give birth alone, and his child. The nurse immediately approaches, ready to help. The contraction seems to be letting up. Callista exhales and opens her eyes. They are moist from the strain. "You need to go through, dear," the nurse says softly. Callista nods. She casts one last glance at Kwang-hee. There is no hatred in it. There is only determination and weariness to the core. "Goodbye, Kwang-hee," she says, turning and walking slowly toward those double doors, leaning on the nurse's arm. He remains standing in the middle of the empty, bright corridor. He watches her leave. The doors open before her and close, hiding her from view. An ordinary day is over. Forever. He stands like that for a few minutes after the doors close. The click of the lock seems incredibly loud to him. His ears are ringing. He feels slightly dizzy and leans against the cold wall. His phone vibrates in his pocket. He takes it out mechanically. On the screen is a message from his assistant. "Kwang-hee, meeting in 40 minutes. The car will arrive at the clinic in 5. Business, negotiations, supplies. The world that, just 5 minutes ago, was the only thing that mattered. He looks at the screen, then at the door behind which Callista disappeared. At that door with the sign he can now make out. Maternity ward. No unauthorized entry. He brings the phone to his ear. The call is answered instantly. "Cancel everything," he says in a voice that leaves no room for discussion. There's a brief pause on the other end. The assistant doesn't ask again. All he hears is, "Understood. Let's move it to..." Kwang-hee interrupts. He hangs up without waiting for a response. He turns off the phone. He simply places his finger on the button and holds it until the screen goes black. Silence. He takes a deep breath. The smell of antiseptic no longer seems irritating, but somehow important. He looks around. At the end of the corridor, where he came from, stands his driver. He's watching him, ready to approach at any moment. Kwang-hee gives him a slight wave of the hand. "Stay there." Then he walks not toward the exit, but toward the reception desk. The girl looks at him with a professional smile. "I'll be here for a while," he says. His tone is even, bossy. His usual firmness has returned, but now it's directed at a different goal. "I need a waiting room, or just a place, and to be informed about the condition of Callista's patient. Reynolds, when will there be information?" The administrator looks at him, her smile faltering slightly. "Sorry, sir, but patient information is confidential. You can wait in the common hall on the first floor." He doesn't argue. He simply places his business card on the counter. It only has his name and number. No job title, no company name, but the card's appearance, its thickness, and matte finish speak for themselves. "I'll be waiting right here, by these doors," he says quietly, "and I'd be very grateful if you could find a way to keep me informed. As an exception." He's not threatening, he's stating a fact, and he looks at her in a way that makes her first blush, then turn pale, and nod quickly. I'll pass your request on to the head nurse of the department," she mumbles. Kwang Hee nods, turns, and walks to the chair directly across from those very doors. He sits down. He keeps his back straight. He places his hands on his knees. He is ready to wait. The hall is quiet. A clock ticks somewhere in the distance. Impersonal piano music blares from the speakers. He sits and stares at the door. His head is empty of thoughts. There is only an image, her face at the moment of contraction, her eyes full of determination and pain. And then the memories come flooding back, not like a stream, but like sharp, abrupt shots. The last day, their apartment, or rather, the huge, cold penthouse she'd never called home. He stands by the panoramic window, his back to her. Behind him is the silence he's created. He's just returned, late, again. Kwang Hee, he hears her voice. It's not loud, but there's a new, unfamiliar firmness to it. He turns around. She's standing in the middle of the white living room, wearing simple jeans and a t-shirt. Her white hair is pulled back into a loose ponytail. She's holding a small duffel bag, the same one she brought with her when she came to visit him 2 years ago. I'm leaving, she says. He blinks. He doesn't understand. What? Where? For a while? Forever, she replies. And in her eyes he sees neither anger nor hysteria. He sees weariness, so deep it's unfathomable. I can't take it anymore. I'm suffocating here. You don't even notice I exist. You live in your world of steel and silence, and I'm just another beautiful object in it. I need more. I need to live. He feels a chill run through him. Pride. Pride is always the first to raise its head. If you're unhappy, we can discuss the terms. More money? A new apartment? He says, and he can hear it himself, like a deal. She shakes her head. Something like pity crosses her face. See, you speak the language of transactions even now. You don't ask why. You offer a price. I don't need your price, Kwang Hee. I needed you, but it seems you're not here. She turns and walks toward the door, her steps light and determined. Callista! His voice sounds sharp, commanding. She stops, without turning around. If you walk out that door, don't come back, he says. A final argument, an ultimatum that always worked. She turns around. She looks at him, and for the first time in months, he clearly sees in her eyes what he'd tried to ignore, pain. I'm not planning to, she answers quietly, and leaves. The click of the lock, he heard it then too. He stood by the window until morning, hoping she'd come to her senses, that she'd come back. She didn't. A week later, his lawyers arrived with divorce papers. She demanded nothing, no money, no property, only her freedom. He signed, gritting his teeth, decided to erase her from his life. Like a mistake, sitting in the hard hospital chair, he clenches his fists. His nails dig into his palms. He was blind, deaf. He lost her on the wrong day. He lost her every day before, through the silence, through his absence, through his cold practicality. And now she's there, behind the door. And with her, a part of him he never even knew was there. An hour passes, then another. He doesn't move. Occasionally, a nurse comes out, and he instinctively jumps up, but she passes by. The receptionist brought him a glass of water. He nodded, but didn't drink. He's almost frozen when the door opens again. It's not a nurse who emerges, but Callista herself. Or rather, she emerges, leaning on a rolling IV pole. She's now wearing a hospital gown. Her face is drawn, and there are dark shadows under her eyes. She moves slowly, step by step, down the hallway, obviously watched by the nurse walking behind her. He's instantly on his feet. He sees her walking, her teeth clenched, her face contorted into a grimace. She stops, leans against the counter, breathing quickly and shallowly. A contraction. He takes a step forward, but the nurse gently stops him with a gesture. Don't interfere. Callista opens her eyes. She sees him. There's no surprise in her gaze. There's only tired irritation. You're still here, she says, catching her breath. He simply nods. He can't take his eyes off her hands, her white knuckles gripping the metal counter. You don't have to. Ah! Her words trail off. She closes her eyes again, her body tensing. She lets out a soft moan that cuts him like a knife. He can't stand it anymore. He forgets all the rules, all her prohibitions. He approaches her from the other side, without touching her, and says to the nurse, trying to sound calm, "How can I help? What does she need?" The nurse, a young girl, looks at him, then at Callista, who cannot speak now. Walking is good for you, but you need to be protected in case. Kwang Hee nods. He walks next to Callista as she takes another step, having waited out the contraction. He doesn't hold her, but his hand is close, ready. He silently moves the chair out of her way. When she freezes in pain again, he stands there, helpless, feeling her every moan reverberate through him like physical pain. After the third such stop, a doctor emerges from the door. A woman of about 50, with intelligent, attentive eyes. She looks at this strange group, the exhausted patient, the tense nurse, and the tall man in an expensive suit who looks completely lost. "Callista, how's it going?" the doctor asks her. "Slowly," Callista breathes out with difficulty. The doctor nods, looking at the chart on her tablet. Then her gaze shifts to Kwang Hee. "Are you a relative?" Callista is about to say something, but Kwang Hee beats her to it. He looks the doctor straight in the eye. "I'm the child's father," he says clearly. Not a shadow of a doubt. He believed it himself. It became a fact. The doctor looks at Callista, asking silently. Callista, after a moment's struggle with herself, nods weakly. "Yes, so be it." "Okay," the doctor says. "You're making progress, but dilation is slower than we'd like. If things don't improve in the next 2 hours, we might consider induction. For now, keep walking, it'll help. And try to relax between contractions, Callista. Tension is just getting in the way." The doctor is about to leave, but Kwang Hee takes a step towards her, lowering his voice. "Doctor, will she be okay?" His voice betrayed something he had been carefully hiding: fear. The doctor looks at him, and her gaze softens. She sees not a mafia boss, but a frightened man. Childbirth is a natural process, but difficult. All of Callista's vital signs are normal. "We're monitoring her closely. The most important thing now is her calm and confidence," she says professionally, but not without warmth. She glances at Callista, who's breathing deeply again, leaning against the wall. She needs support. Not physical, but emotional. If you're here to support her, then do so. If not, then it's best not to interfere. She nods and leaves. Callista pushes herself away from the wall. The pain seems to have eased somewhat. Now her eyes burn not with pain, but with pure, cold anger. She looks at Kwang Hee. "Are you crazy?" she hisses, trying to speak quietly so as not to attract the attention of the nurse, who has stepped aside. "The baby's father? You have no right to talk like that. You have no right to discuss my condition with the doctors. You're a nobody here." He doesn't turn away. He accepts her anger. It's better than icy indifference. "I couldn't just stand there and watch," he says simply. "Coulda, shoulda, you intruded. You always do this. You think if you want something, you can just go and push everyone around, give everyone orders. This is my life, my birth." Her voice trembled with impotent rage and exhaustion. A new contraction hits, cutting off her words. She groans, doubled over, clutching the bar. He automatically reaches out to support her elbow. She jerks back furiously. "Don't touch me!" she screams through clenched teeth. He jerks his hand away as if burned. He stands and watches her struggle with the pain alone, walled off from him by anger and resentment. He understands every word she says. He really has always acted this way. He took what he wanted. He controlled everything. And that's precisely why he lost what mattered most. The fight ends. Callista straightens up, breathing deeply and raggedly. Tears of pain and anger well up in her eyes. She wipes them away with the back of her hand, furiously. Kwang Hee can't bear to see this anymore. He doesn't know how to ask for forgiveness. He's never done it before. But now there's no choice. "Callista," his voice sounds quiet and unfamiliar to him, without the usual armor. "You're right. 100% right. I intruded. I acted as I always do, as the master of the situation. I have no right to do this. Forgive me." She looks at him, her eyes wide. She expected anything: anger, coldness, orders. But not this. Not this quiet, sincere capitulation. He continues, choosing his words with difficulty. "I'm not asking for anything. I'm not asking for forgiveness for the past. I know I don't deserve it. I just—" He searches for the words. "I can't leave. Do you understand? I physically can't turn around and walk out of here. I'll sit in that chair and wait. I'll wait without interfering. But if you need anything at all, a glass of water, for someone to call a doctor, just for someone in this room besides the medical staff," he trails off. That's all he can offer. No rights, only presence, only availability. She's silent for a long time. She looks past him, at the wall. Her breathing becomes more even. The anger in her eyes slowly gives way to that same endless weariness. "Why do you do this?" she finally asks. And there's no longer any anger in her voice. There's only exhaustion and bewilderment. 6 months of silence. And now this? Because of the child? He shakes his head. Not only I saw you, and I realized that I was wrong every day, that you didn't leave because you wanted more money or freedom. You left because you were lonely with me, and it's my fault. The biggest one. Another contraction, but weaker now. Or maybe she's just too tired to fight it. She just stands there, eyes closed, waiting it out. Then she opens them. She looks at the chair where he's been sitting all these hours, at his switched-off phone lying next to him, at his face, which reveals tension and a sincere desire not to cause harm. She was too tired to fight on two fronts, with the pain and with him. Her strength was waning, and there was no lie in his words. There was that very truth, rare for him. Okay, she breathes out, almost inaudibly. He looks at her, not believing. You can come in, into the room, sit, be silent, and don't give advice, and don't talk to the doctors without me. Deal? Her voice is weak, but that same steely edge he remembers reappears in it. He nods, unable to speak, just nods. She turns and, pushing the counter in front of her, slowly moves back toward the doors. She doesn't tell him to follow her, but she doesn't forbid him either. He waits for her to take a few steps, then follows carefully, keeping his distance. The nurse, who had been observing this scene, lets Callista pass, then looks at Kwang Hee questioningly. He's with me, Callista says quietly, without turning around. And Kwang Hee crosses the threshold of the doors, behind which a new, unfamiliar, and frightening reality began for him. The room turns out to be small but bright. The smell here isn't as strong as in the hallways. There's a bed, a chair for visitors, and medical equipment pushed against the wall. Callista slowly, with the nurse's assistance, settles into the bed. She takes off her slippers and pulls her legs up. Her expression is focused. Kwang Hee stands by the door, hesitant to go any further. He feels like a stranger in this territory of pain and intimacy. Sit down, the nurse tells him, nodding toward a chair in the corner. If Callista doesn't mind. Callista doesn't answer. She closes her eyes, breathing deeply and evenly, as she was apparently taught in class. Kwang Hee carefully approaches the chair and sits on the very edge. He folds his hands in his lap, trying to take up as little space as possible, to be as inconspicuous as possible. 10 minutes of silence pass, only the sound of Callista's breathing and the distant echoing footsteps in the hallway. Then he sees her face change. Her brows furrow, her lips press together. She stops breathing deeply. Her breaths become short and rapid. She grabs the bed railing in one movement, her knuckles whitening. A fight, but now it looks different, stronger, deeper. She doesn't make a sound. She simply curls up into a ball of tension, her body arching. It doesn't last long, maybe 40 seconds. Then she exhales sharply, unclenching her fingers, and falls back against the pillows as if someone had struck her. Sweat beaded on her forehead. The nurse, who was writing something down by the window, comes over and looks at the monitor next to the bed. Okay. Progress is being made. The contractions are becoming more regular. Rest while you can, she says calmly, and walks out, leaving them alone. Callista lies with her eyes closed, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Kwang Hee sits rooted to the spot. He doesn't know what to do. The doctor's words are running through his head. She needs support. But how? He's afraid to make an unnecessary movement. Several more contractions pass, each one stronger than the last. Now she can no longer remain silent. She moans softly as the pain hits, biting her lip. Between them, she lies soaking wet, with strands of white hair on her forehead damp with sweat. Kwang Hee can't take it anymore. He stands up. He goes to the small sink in the corner of the room. He takes a paper towel, wets it with cold water, and carefully wrung it out. He walks over to the bed and stops 2 steps away, holding the bundle in his hands. Callista, he says quietly. She opens her eyes, her gaze clouded with pain. Can I? On my forehead? She looks at him, then at the wet towel in his hands. She nods slightly. He takes a step closer. Very carefully, barely breathing, he presses the cool cloth to her forehead. She closes her eyes and lets out a short, relieved sigh. Not a word, just a sound. But for him, it's more than any gratitude. More, she says quietly, as the towel warms. He nods, returns to the sink, and wets it again. He does it again, and again, after the next contraction. Then he pours the water into a plastic cup with a straw, and holds it to her lips as she opens her eyes. Drink, little sips, he says as quietly as she does. She drinks. Her hands are shaking. She can't hold the glass. He holds it tightly so the straw doesn't shake. She takes a few sips and leans back. Thank you, she breathes. It's the first normal word she's said to him since their truce. He simply nods and retreats back to his corner. But this time he doesn't sit. He stands ready, watching her. He brings a fresh towel without being asked when he sees her fanning herself. He adjusts the pillow that slips when she fidgets, searching for a comfortable position. He doesn't speak, he just does. Slowly, carefully, watching her reaction. He learns to read her by the slightest movement of her eyebrows, by the change in her breathing. The pain intensifies. The intervals between contractions become shorter. The doctor arrives, checks her dilation, and offers some reassuring words. But Kwang Hee can see from her face that everything is going hard. Callista isn't just moaning anymore. She's screaming. Briefly, strangledly, as the wave of pain reaches its peak, her body tenses to the limit, and she grips the bed railings as if trying to break metal. Kwang Hee stands next to him. His own hand is clenched into a fist so tight his knuckles ache. He feels every ache in her body, as if it were his own. He's helpless. He can't take this on himself. A new contraction hits, the most intense yet. Callista screams louder, her body arching. Her hand slips from the railing and frantically searches for support in the air. Instinctively, without thinking, Kwang Hee extends her hand. Her fingers dig into him. She grabs his hand with such force, he thinks his bones will crack. She squeezes it, as if trying to crush it. It hurts. It hurts so much. But he doesn't even wince. He stands there, letting her hold on like an anchor in a storm. Her scream fades into a hoarse moan. The contraction subsides. But her fingers don't unclench. She holds onto his hand, breathing raggedly, her whole body pressing his palm to the edge of the bed. She stares off into space, her gaze clouded. She doesn't even seem to realize whose hand she's holding. He doesn't move. He doesn't try to break free. He just stands there, feeling the heat of her skin, the convulsive tremor in her fingers. This is the first physical contact between them in 6 months. Not a kiss, not a hug, pain and the tenacious grip of despair. But for him, this is more than all the previous touches, because now she needs him. Truly. The nurse comes over to check something. Her gaze falls on their clasped hands. She doesn't say anything, just lets Kwang Hee know with her eyes. Hold on. And keep holding on. The contraction finally subsides. Callista unclenches her fingers. Her hand falls to the bed like a whip. She looks at her palm, then slowly moves her gaze to his. There are red, almost white marks from her nails on it, slowly beginning to fill with blood. She looks away. Shame? Embarrassment? He doesn't understand. I'm sorry, she says hoarsely, closing her eyes. Don't apologize, he replies quickly. His voice is hoarse too. It's fine. There's silence between them again. But it's different now. Tense, but not hostile. Saturated with what they've just experienced. I found out, almost right after I left, she suddenly says into the silence. Her eyes are still closed. She speaks evenly, without intonation, as if reporting the weather. I took a test. 3 lines. I sat on the floor of my new rented apartment and laughed. Then I cried. Then I just sat there. He listens, holding his breath. He's afraid to move, lest he frighten those words away. I thought about telling you. I picked up the phone 1,000 times. But what would it have changed? You would have offered money, the best doctors, a private room, maybe even stopped being late, for a while. She opens her eyes and looks at the ceiling. But that's not what I needed, and not what the child would need. Not for a year, forever. And you don't know how to be there forever, Kwang Hee. You know how to solve problems. And this isn't a problem. This is life. Slow, difficult, sometimes boring. You would have suffocated, and we would have started fighting again. And I didn't want my child to grow up in an atmosphere of quiet coldness and disappointment. Better just silence. She says this without reproach, simply as a fact. And in this fact lies the whole truth about him, about them, about why she remained silent. He's silent for a long time. Her words hang in the air, heavy and undeniable. She's right. Every word of hers. That's exactly what he would have done. He would have solved the pregnancy problem with money and organization. And within a month, he would have plunged headlong into his own affairs, leaving her alone in a gilded cage with a child. You're right, he finally says, his voice hollow. That's exactly what I would have done. Because I didn't know any other way. I thought it was a way to show I cared, to solve problems. He pauses, choosing his words. He needs to say this now, because something new is about to begin, and he may not get another chance. I don't know how to be different. I don't know how, But I saw you today. I saw your pain, and my helplessness, and this horror at the thought that I could ruin everything again, just with my presence," he says slowly, with difficulty. "I can't make big promises. They're worthless. But I will make one. I promise to learn, to listen, not to decide for you, not to buy, just to be. If you let me, not as a husband, not as a boss, as a man who wants to be there for you and his child, and who understands that he needs to earn the right to even stand in this room first." He falls silent. He has said all he can. He has no more words. Callista looks at him. There's no longer the fire in her eyes. There's a deep weariness, and something else. Not trust yet, but perhaps a shadow of doubt about his utter futility. "Words are just words, Kwang-hee," she says quietly. "I know," he nods. "That's why I'm here. And I'll be here, after, for as long as it takes, to prove it with my actions." Another contraction begins to creep up, interrupting this difficult conversation. Her face contorts again. She instinctively reaches out, seeking support. And this time, he doesn't wait. He carefully but firmly takes her hand in his, giving her something to hold on to. She squeezes his fingers, and a cry of pain erupts from her chest again. But now he holds her hand, absorbing some of the tension, and quietly, almost whispering, he repeats the same words he heard from the nurse. "Breathe, Callista. It's okay. Breathe. I'm here." He doesn't know if she can hear him through the pain, but he speaks, and holds, and this is his first, smallest deed, the first step in his new promise. He holds her hand, repeating his quiet words, when the door to the room suddenly opens. What enters is not a nurse and a doctor, but two doctors and another nurse with a mobile equipment stand. Their faces are focused, their movements quick and precise. The head doctor, that same woman, approaches Callista. The contraction is just letting up, and Callista is lying there, drenched in sweat, her eyes closed. "Callista, listen to me carefully," the doctor says, her voice soft but very serious. "The baby's heart rate is dropping during contractions. It's not critical, but we can't wait any longer. We need to speed things up. We'll give you an epidural so you can rest and gain strength, and then we'll begin induction. Okay?" Callista opens her eyes. There is no fear in them. There is only a tired clarity and determination. She nods, unable to speak. The doctor looks at Kwang-hee. "You need to go out. Now." Kwang-hee doesn't move. His fingers are still intertwined with Callista's. "I'm staying," he says. Not a request, a statement. "This is a medical procedure. You need to go out into the hallway," the doctor insists, gesturing toward the door. Callista squeezes his hand weakly. She looks at him. "Come out, just for a little while," she whispers. Her lips are dry. "Please." That "please" decides everything. He slowly unclenches his fingers and lets go of her hand. He stands and walks toward the door. He feels each step become an effort, as if he's leaving a part of himself in this room. The corridor again. White, bright, endless. He stands directly in front of the closed door, his back against the cold wall. There's emptiness in his chest, a complete, absolute silence inside. Then this silence begins to fill. Fear. He'd never been truly afraid. He wasn't afraid of bullets, threats, or failed deals. Those were risks that could be calculated and controlled. Now he controls nothing. Nothing. Nothing depends on him. He could lose her. He'd been pushing that thought away for hours. Now it was bursting in and taking over everything. He could lose her right behind this door, and the child he'd never even seen. And then everything, his attempt to fix things, his foolish promise to study, would be meaningless, because there would be nothing to fix and no one to fix it for. He feels a chill run down his spine. His hands begin to tremble. He clenches them into fists, but the trembling comes from within, unstoppable. He suddenly remembers her laughter with incredible clarity, rare, loud, infectious, the laughter that had almost disappeared in the last months of their marriage. He would give anything to hear it again. All his money, his power, his influence, everything he valued so much and thought he lived for. The door opens. A nurse comes out with empty medication containers. He steps forward. "How are things?" His voice is hoarse. "Everything is going according to plan. Now the anesthesia will take effect. She'll rest, and then it'll begin soon," the nurse says briefly and hurries on. Soon means nothing. Soon could be in a minute or in 5 hours. He leans back against the wall. The fear doesn't go away. It becomes a background noise, a hum in his blood. He's afraid like he's never been in his life. and this feeling completely breaks his old, familiar shell. 20 minutes later, they call him back inside. Callista is lying on her back. She looks different. Her face is more relaxed. Her eyes are tired, but they don't have that wild tension from the pain. The anesthesia has done its job. "You can come over," she says quietly, seeing him at the threshold. He comes over and takes his place next to the bed again. He sees new tubes and sensors. Two waveforms flicker on the monitor, her heartbeat and the baby's. He doesn't understand the readings, but he watches the green numbers as if they were sacred symbols. "It's scary," Callista suddenly says, looking at the ceiling. Not at him, just into space. He nods, though she can't see. "I know." She turns her head and looks at him. "You too?" "Yes," he answers honestly. "Very." This admission seems to calm her a little. They are both here, both afraid. They are not enemies in this room. A new phase begins half an hour later. The pain, according to Callista, has returned, but now it's different, pressing, incessant. Her face contorts again. She grabs his hand, this time consciously. "Don't let go," she says through clenched teeth. "I won't let go," he replies, and he holds her. When she screams, he stands next to her, pressing a cool towel to her neck with his free hand. He barely speaks, only the simplest words. "You can do it. I'm here. Everything is fine. Everything is going as it should. You are strong, the strongest." He's not a poet. He doesn't have beautiful phrases, but his voice, low and even, sounds like an anchor in this maelstrom of pain and fear. He repeats these phrases over and over, like a mantra, and it seems she's beginning to rely on them. She looks at him in moments of respite, and there's no longer the same wall in her gaze. There's simply weariness and hope that this nightmare will soon end. The doctor commands her to push. Callista musters all her strength. Her body tenses. Her face flushes with the inhuman effort. Kwang Hee holds her shoulder, helping her rise, and continues to whisper his simple words directly into her ear, drowning out her own cries. "Come on, Callista. Come on. More. I'm with you. I'm here." He feels her every effort resonate within him. He's become one big tension, one desire to help her, to do anything. He's her fulcrum, and he'll stand firm until he collapses. Then the doctors ask him to leave. Again. "The final stage. You'd better wait outside," the midwife says. He sees panic in Callista's eyes. She doesn't want him to leave, but the doctors insist. He releases her sweaty hand and walks out. The door closes. He hears a muffled cry from behind it, then the doctor's commands, the metallic sound of instruments. He can't stand. He goes to the same waiting room where he sat this morning. It's empty. He sits down in the same chair. These are the longest hours of his life, although in reality, no more than 40 minutes pass, but each minute stretches into an eternity. He sits hunched over, elbows on his knees, and stares at the floor. He's not thinking about the future, not about what will happen after. He's thinking about the past, about the first time he saw her at an art exhibition. She was standing in front of an abstract painting, her face so spiritual. He, cynical and practical, approached her to say something intelligent about investing in art, and she asked him what emotions he saw in those brushstrokes. He was confused. This had never happened to him before. He thinks about their first dinner, how she laughed at his excessive seriousness, how, without realizing it, he began to smile back. Then he thinks about how everything gradually changed, how work began to consume him completely, how he stopped hearing her, how her laughter grew quieter, her eyes sadder. He saw it, but he brushed it off. He thought it would pass. He thought he had time. He thought the main thing was to provide her with everything material, and the rest would somehow take care of itself. What a fool he was. Not just a fool, a blind, self-confident egotist. If something goes wrong now, he'll never forgive himself. Never. These last hours he spent with her will be his worst punishment, because they showed him what could have been, and they would take it away forever. He covers his face with his hands. He's not crying. He just sits there, in the darkness behind his palms, listening to the hum of the ventilation and the frantic pounding of his heart. And then he hears a sound. Not a scream, not the clang of metal. A different sound. Quiet, piercing, incredibly alive. Baby crying. He jumps up abruptly. He stands in the middle of the room, holding his breath. The crying behind the door grows louder, gaining strength. It's not a cry of pain. It's a cry of life, of rage, of the first breath. Then there's silence. Not complete. Muffled voices and movements can be heard. His heart is pounding so hard, he's afraid it'll burst out. He doesn't dare take a step. The door opens. The doctor comes out. The same one. Her gown is stained. Her hair is untucked from under her cap. She looks tired. Kwang Hee freezes. He looks at her face, trying to read the verdict. And then the doctor smiles. A wide, sincere, happy smile. "Everything's fine," she says. Simply, "You have a son." Callista is fine. She's tired, but everything's fine. The baby is healthy. He cried right away. Everything's fine. The words, "everything is fine," fall on him like a warm shower after a long drought. They wash away the fear, the tension, the horror of the last few hours. His legs give way. He grabs the back of the chair to keep from falling. Can I see?" He squeezes out with difficulty. "Just another 15 minutes. They'll be fixed up, then we can come in," the doctor says, nodding and returning to the room. Kwang Hee slowly sinks into the chair. He sits and stares into space. His head is empty, only the echo of these words. "It's okay, son. Callista is okay." He feels tears streaming down his cheeks. Hot, fast, uncontrollable. He doesn't try to stop them. He just sits and cries from a wild, all-consuming relief. From gratitude to someone or something he never believed in. From the understanding that the worst is behind him. And from the realization that in that room, behind the door, is now his son. And Callista, who has once again become not his ex-wife, but the most important woman in the world. These 15 minutes drag on longer than all the hours of waiting that preceded them. Kwang Hee tries to compose himself. He wipes his face, straightens his wrinkled silk jacket, takes a few deep breaths. But nothing helps. Everything inside him trembles. His hands, his knees, his heart. Finally, the same nurse comes out and nods to him. "You can come in." He approaches the door. His palm is damp on the handle. He pushes the door and walks in. The room is now tidy. The bright lights are dimmed. The distinctive smell of antiseptic still hangs in the air, but now it's mingled with something new, a bit sweet. Callista lies on the bed. She's changed into a clean hospital gown, her white hair pulled back into a messy bun. Her face is pale, with dark circles under her eyes, but a slight flush plays across her cheeks. She looks exhausted and incredibly calm at the same time. Her eyes are half closed, and on her chest, covered with a light diaper, lies a small bundle. Kwang Hee freezes in the doorway. The whole world narrows to this picture, her and this tiny bundle of life. He can't take a single step. Callista turns her head and sees him. She's not smiling, but her gaze is soft. Tired, but soft. "Come here," she says quietly, her voice hoarse from screaming. He forces his legs to move. He approaches the bed, stopping at a respectful distance, afraid to disturb this fragile idol. "Look," whispers Callista, slightly pulling the corner of the blanket away from the baby's face. Kwang Hee leans over and sees him. A tiny, wrinkled face the color of dark honey. A small button nose. Plump, swollen lips. On his head are short, damp, dark hairs, more like down. One small fist is pressed to his cheek. The child is asleep, his blue-veined eyelids tightly closed. He occasionally smacks his lips in his sleep. This is the most beautiful and the most terrifying thing Kwang Hee has seen in his life. "A boy," Callista says quietly, watching his reaction. 3 kilograms, 700 grams, 52 centimeters. Son, he has a son. The doctor's words from the hallway become reality. He didn't just hear them, he now sees them. This is a living, breathing little person. His flesh and blood, part of him and part of Callista. He doesn't know what to feel, overwhelmed. A torrent of emotions he can't name crashes over him. Awe, horror, tenderness. A huge responsibility that suddenly falls on his shoulders with such a weight that he can physically feel it. He's perfect, Kwang Hee breathes out with difficulty. There are no other words. Callista looks at the child, and a barely noticeable, weak smile appears on her lips. A smile of pure, boundless exhaustion and happiness. "Yes," she simply agrees. They are silent. Kwang Hee doesn't take his eyes off his son. He studies every detail of his face, the shape of his eyebrows, just like Callista's, his full lips, her lips, his small, perfect ears. His heart clenches with some new, unfamiliar pain. But it's a good pain. The pain of already loving this little one more than life itself, and realizing how easily he can be lost, how defenseless he is. He feels tears streaming down his cheeks again. This time they're quiet, without sobs. They just roll down on their own. He doesn't try to hide them. He doesn't even notice them until a single hot drop falls on the back of his hand. He looks at her, then back at his son, and he realizes he's crying not only from happiness and relief, he's crying from shame. Shame that he could have missed this moment. Shame that Callista went through all this alone, preparing for the birth. For those 6 months, while his son grew beneath her heart, and he didn't even suspect it, he built his houses of cards out of power and money, thinking that this was life. "I'm sorry," he whispers, addressed both to the sleeping child and to Callista. Callista hears. She tears her gaze away from her son and looks at him. She sees his tears. She sees genuine, undisguised remorse on his always inscrutable face. Something in her gaze softens even more. "Not now," she says quietly. "Now is not the time for that. Now, just look at him." He nods, brushing away tears with a rough motion of his hand. He stares. He can't stop looking. He's afraid to move, lest he disrupt the magic. He's afraid to breathe too loudly. The baby's lips move in their sleep, making a soft sound like a sigh. Kwang Hee freezes, holding his breath. Then he can't help but smile. A wide, awkward smile. The kind he hasn't seen in years. Is he yawning?" he asks, incredibly stupidly. Callista laughs quietly, short and hoarse. "Yeah, I guess so." That laugh of hers, even so tired, is the best sound in the world. Better than any child's cry, though his son's cry was beautiful. It's the sound of her being alive. She's here. And it seems she doesn't hate him at this moment. He wants to reach out, touch that tiny hand, but he's afraid. His own hands, accustomed to gripping weapons or signing orders, now seem too big, too rough, too dangerous for such a fragile creature. The silence is broken again by the nurse. She comes in to check the machine readings and take Callista's blood pressure. "Everything's great," she says. "The baby is too. They'll take him now for his first procedures, weigh him again and clean him up. Daddy can come and see if he wants." Kwang Hee nods, but first looks at Callista. He seeks her permission. "Go," she says. "You'll see for yourself." The nurse carefully takes the sleepy baby from Callista's arms. Kwang Hee watches, fascinated, as she carries him away, wrapping him warmly in a blanket. Then he takes a step to follow her. "Kwang Hee!" Callista's voice stops him. He turns around. She lies there, looking at him. Her weariness is still there, but that steely determination he saw in the hallway that morning is back in her eyes, a determination to set boundaries. "Sit down," she says. "We need to talk." While he's gone, he obediently sits down in the chair next to the bed. A premonition grips his stomach. The happiness of the first few minutes fades, giving way to sober reality. "I allowed you to be here today, because it was beyond my control. And you helped. Really? Thank you for that," she begins. Her words are grateful, but her tone is businesslike. "But that doesn't change the past, and it doesn't give you a right to the future." He nods silently. He is ready to listen. "This child is my son," she says clearly. "Legally, morally, physically. I carried him, I gave birth to him, and I will take care of him. I made this decision alone, and am ready to bear sole responsibility for him." She pauses to catch her breath. It's still hard for her to speak. "You are his biological father. I won't hide that from him. Someday. But your involvement in his life will only be on my terms, and it will start from scratch. Not as a father to whom everyone owes. As a man who needs to prove he can be there without causing harm." "What conditions?" Kwang Hee asks quietly. His voice is resigned. He has neither the strength nor the desire to argue. She's right about every word. "First, no money, no gifts, no expensive strollers, no apartments, nothing. I'll provide for him myself. If you want to help, help with your time. Come and sit with him while I sleep. Go buy diapers or baby food. Don't buy store-bought ones. Buy one pack." He nods. It's difficult for him. Money is his main tool. But he understands. She doesn't want him to buy his place in their life. "Second, your job. Your world. He must never touch it. Never. You come to him as Kwang Hee, not as the boss. If there's even the slightest threat, even the shadow of a risk, you disappear. Forever. Without further ado." "I guarantee that," he immediately replies. "He will be absolutely safe. I will rebuild everything that needs to be done." She looks at him doubtfully, but nods. "Third, we are not a couple. We are not a family in the traditional sense. We are the parents of one child, and all our interactions will be solely around him. No attempts to bring back the past. No hints. No conversations of, 'Do you remember?' We are building a new one. From a clean slate. You are building a relationship with your son. And separately, A civilized, respectful relationship with me as the mother of your child. Is this possible? He's silent for a long moment, digesting it. It's harsh. It cuts off all avenues of retreat, of illusions, but it's honest, and it's the only possible path forward. Yes, he finally says. It's possible. I don't promise it will be easy, but I promise to try, to follow your rules. Callista says, her voice shaking with exhaustion, not uncertainty. If you disappear again, if your work, your world, becomes more important again, if you hurt him with your indifference, I will disappear. I will find a way. And you will never find us again. This is not a threat. It is a promise. You get one chance, Kwang-hee. Just one. He looks her straight in the eyes. He sees not anger in them, but an absolute maternal determination to protect her child at any cost, even from him. I understand, he says. One chance. I'll try not to miss it. She leans back against the pillows, as if she's lifted a huge burden from her body. It seems she said everything she wanted to. Okay, she breathes out. Now you can go see our son, his first ever weigh-in. He stands up and turns around at the threshold. Callista, thank you, for him, and for this chance. She's already closing her eyes, exhausted beyond measure. She simply nods without opening them. Kwang-hee steps out into the hallway. The rules are set. The game has begun. The most important game of his life, where the stakes are his son, and where he is no longer the master of the situation, but merely a student admitted to probation. He feels not fear, but a strange focused clarity. He has a goal, and he knows that to achieve it, he will have to become a different person. Now he goes to see his son, the first step in this new, incredibly complex and important life. Kwang-hee finds them in a small treatment room. A nurse is carefully swaddling the baby, who is now clean and in a fresh diaper. He isn't crying, but quietly fidgeting, waving his tiny fists. Would you like to hold him? The nurse asks, noticing him at the entrance. Kwang-hee nods. His throat is dry. He approaches. The nurse shows him how to place his hands correctly, one under his head and back, the other under his bottom. Her hands are confident, experienced. His are stiff, tense. She places the baby in his trembling hands. And in that moment, Kwang-hee's whole world stops. Weight. He feels weight. A small, warm, living lump that fits entirely on his forearms. He's afraid to move, afraid to breathe. His huge, strong hands feel like clumsy vices. He freezes in an unnatural position, looking at his son's face, which is now only a foot away, his own. The baby winces, moves his lips, then his dark, matted eyelashes flutter, and he opens his eyes. They are a dull gray, unseeing, but they stare into space, straight at his father. Kwang-hee forgets everything, the fear, the awkwardness. He looks into those cloudy eyes, and something inside him shifts, completely and irrevocably. This is his son, his flesh and blood, his continuation, and he will protect this little person until his last breath. He doesn't notice the tears streaming down his face again. He simply stands there, mesmerized, gently holding the baby to his chest, feeling his warmth through the thin fabric of the diaper. What's his name? The nurse asks quietly, smiling. Kwang-hee looks at her, then at the child. He doesn't know. He hasn't even thought about it. It's not his decision. Callista hasn't decided yet, he says, his voice thick with emotion. An hour later, they are all transferred to another, more spacious room. Callista sleeps heavily, exhausted. The baby, fed and swaddled, sleeps in a transparent hospital crib next to her bed. Kwang-hee sits in the same chair. He's not sleeping. He can't take his eyes off the cradle. Sometimes he gets up, comes very close, and just watches. At the rise and fall of the baby's chest, at his clenched fists, at the absolute trust and peace on his face. Callista's rules. They no longer seem like an obstacle to him, but the only true path. Yes, he must learn everything from scratch, but he has someone to do it for. Callista wakes to the sound of her baby's soft grunts. She instantly comes to, turns over, and peers into the crib. She's reassured to see that he's simply moving in his sleep. Her gaze meets Kwang-hee's. They stare at each other silently, across the sleeping child. No words are needed. There's something new in this silence. Not peace, not yet, but a truce, sealed by the most important being in the world for both of them. Callista smiles faintly, just a little. He's sleeping, she whispers. Kwang-hee nods. And again, silence. But this time it's not awkward, it's shared, filled with their shared sleeping miracle. 3 days later, Callista is discharged. Kwang Hee is already up in the morning. His driver is standing outside the hospital in a black SUV. But this isn't the flashy limousine. The car is large, comfortable, and has a child seat in the back, which Kwang Hee bought himself at a regular store after reading dozens of reviews. Callista, dressed in loose clothing, carefully steps out, holding her son wrapped in a blanket. She looks at the car, then at Kwang Hee, her eyes questioning. "We're not going to the city," he says, opening the door for her. "I have a house outside of town. It's quiet, green, fresh air. It has everything you need, and security that won't be an eyesore." She hesitates. A penthouse in the city center, full of cold chic, would be a nightmare for her, but a country house, that's different. "Okay," she agrees, carefully settling into the back seat next to the child seat. They drive for almost an hour. Callista spends most of the journey silently staring out the window, rocking her son. Kwang Hee sits up front, hesitant to break the silence. The house turns out to be not a palace, but a large, cozy, modern cottage made of wood and glass. It stands on the edge of a forest, surrounded by a high fence, but inside lies a well-kept garden and silence, broken only by the singing of birds. "There are no servants here," Kwang Hee says as they step inside. There's a spacious living room, a fireplace, and panoramic windows overlooking the garden. Everything is clean, bright, and minimalist. Just security around the perimeter. Everything else is as you wish. Callista looks around. There's relief in her eyes. The stuffiness of his old life is gone here. He can breathe here. "Thank you," she says quietly. "This is a nice place." The next day, a car pulls up to the house. A middle-aged, stern-looking woman with kind eyes steps out. It's Lydia, a pediatrician with extensive experience, who will now be coming daily to assist Callista and monitor her health. Kwang Hee found her through trusted sources outside of his own world. He introduced her to Callista, emphasizing that this was only a recommendation and that she would have the final say. Callista talked with Lydia for an hour. Then she left and nodded to Kwang Hee. "She'll stay." Kwang Hee also, without asking, bought everything necessary for baby care. Not mountains of brand-name items, but a sensible set. Several packs of diapers in various sizes, baby cosmetics that Lydia approved, and soft cotton clothes. He stored all of this in an empty room next to Callista's bedroom. "You can make this a nursery," he said. "When you're ready, decorate it however you want. I just brought the basics." Callista walked into the room. She saw neutral colors, empty shelves ready to be filled, a comfortable high chair by the window. No obtrusive luxury, just a space she could make her own. She turned to him. For the first time, her gaze held no suspicion or tired defensiveness. There was assessment, and a slight, very slight, approval. "Okay," she said. "Thank you, that's it." Kwang Hee's life is changing, radically. His phone, which used to ring off the hook, is now silent for most of the day. He's delegated all operational matters to his most trusted assistant. He himself shows up at the office for 2 or 3 hours in the morning to handle only the most important, strategic matters. The rest of the time, he's here at home. He doesn't interfere with Callista and the baby. He's simply present. He's learning how to sterilize bottles according to Lydia's instructions. He goes to a regular supermarket for the first time in his life, and, list in hand, buys baby food, wet wipes, and cotton pads. The cashier stares in amazement at the enormous man with white hair and a perfect silk top, intently studying the ingredients on a jar of zucchini puree. In the evenings, he sits in the living room with his laptop, no longer building an empire, but reading articles on infant development and the postpartum period. He learns about colic, sleep regression, and the importance of simply letting mom sleep for 3 hours straight. One night, he hears a quiet cry. He leaves his room and sees a light under the living room door. Callista, pale, with shadows under her eyes, is cradling her son, who cannot calm down. "Can I try?" Kwang Hee asks quietly. "You could rest for an hour." Callista looks at him, then at her screaming son. She's so exhausted she can't even argue. She carefully hands him the baby. Kwang Hee takes him, places him on his shoulder, as Lydia had shown, and begins to slowly pace the room, quietly humming something incoherent. He's never sung in his life. There's no melody, but there's the low, monotonous rumble of his voice, the warmth of his hand on the baby's back. The crying subsides, turning into whimpering, then soft snoring. Kwang Hee continues walking for another half hour, until the baby falls into a deep sleep. He places him in the bassinet and leaves. Callista is standing in the hallway, She watched them through the half-open door. "Thank you," she says, and there is genuine, living gratitude in her voice. "Always," he replies. This is a small victory, the most important in his life. 2 weeks pass. A semblance of a routine is established. One evening, when the baby is asleep and Lydia has left, they find themselves alone in the living room. Callista is sitting in a chair, wrapped in a blanket. Kwang Hee is on the sofa. The silence isn't awkward, but something unspoken hangs in the air. Callista suddenly asks, not defiantly, with genuine curiosity, "You could have simply provided us with money from afar, fulfilled your fatherly duty in your own way. Why so immersed?" Kwang Hee looks at the fire in the fireplace. He is silent for a long time. "Because when I saw you in that hospital and realized what was happening, I felt horror," he says slowly. "Not because of the child, because of the thought that you could disappear completely, that I would lose my last chance, not even at a family, at redemption." He turns to her. "I was selfish, Callista, deaf and blind. I thought the world revolved around my decisions, my deeds, and you were a beautiful backdrop, and that was my terrible mistake. These 2 weeks, watching you with him, I realized what true strength is, not in control and power, in the quiet, daily care you give him, in your patience. I want to learn at least a small part of that, not to get you back, to become at least a little worthy of being there. A father, not a sponsor." Callista listens without interrupting, her face in shadow. "I wasn't perfect either," she says quietly after a pause. "I closed off. I stopped fighting. I stopped demanding. I simply watched us drift apart, and I harbored resentments. I should have spoken up, insisted. But I just left, thinking it was the only way out." "That was the only way out," Kwang Hee says firmly. "Nothing would have changed if you had screamed. I wouldn't have heard. I needed that shock, that fall into the abyss at those hospital doors, to see the light." She nods, looking at her hands. "I still don't trust you," she says honestly. "There's been too much pain, but I can see you're trying. And that means a lot." "That's enough for now," he says. A week later, Callista decides to name her son. She invites Kwang Hee into the living room. The baby sleeps in her arms. "I want to name him Leon," she says. "It means lion, not for strength or power, for courage of heart, so that he will be brave where we were cowards, so that he will know how to love and cherish those around him." Kwang Hee repeats the name to himself. Leon. It sounds dignified and warm, not pretentious, simple. "Leon," he says out loud, looking at his son. "I like it." He looks at Callista. "Thank you for letting me be part of this choice." She shrugs. "You're his father." These words mean more to him than any titles. In the evening, he stands by the picture window, looking out into the dark garden. Callista approaches. She holds Leon, wrapped in a soft blanket, awake, gazing at the patterns of light from the fireplace on the ceiling. They stand side by side, not touching, but their shoulders almost touch. They look not at the garden, but at their son's face, which slowly lights up with a strange, toothless smile in his sleep. They don't know what will happen next. Will they ever be a couple again? Doubtful. Too much is broken, too many scars, but they give each other a chance. Not for love, for respect, for the trust that must be earned every day with small deeds. A sterilized bottle, a pack of diapers bought, an hour of night duty, a chance to build something new, not on the ruins of an old marriage, but on the foundation of shared responsibility for this small, defenseless person named Leon. A chance to become not just parents to him, but a team, fragile, imperfect, but real. Leon reaches out in his sleep and touches his mother's cheek with his fingers. Callista smiles. Kwang Hee looks at them both, and in his heart, cold and stony for so long, a quiet, uncertain, but living flame of hope flickers. This isn't the end of the story. This is its very beginning.